Dublab.
Welcome to the Quarantine Tapes, a daily podcast from Onassis LA and Dublab. Hosted by Paul Holdengraber, this series chronicles shifting paradigms in the era of social distancing.
Hello.
Hello, could I please speak with Jackie Goldberg?
Speaking. Who's calling?
This is Paul Holdengraber calling you from the Quarantine Tapes. Thank you so much.
Hi, how are you doing? Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you. I'm so pleased that you could find a moment in this very troubling time to take this call and to be a voice on the Quarantine Tapes. Thank you very, very much indeed. How are you?
Very happy to do it. So far, knock on wood, we've been pretty much at home, working from home, and I do go out sometimes. I'm on the school board, as you may know, and so I go in my car. I don't get out of the car, but I go in my car and check the grab and grow sites that are serving my school board district constituents to make sure they've got enough food and the various things that they need to have. So I do that a couple of times a week. But basically, we're pretty much washing our hands frequently with warm water. We're staying away from people. We got 19 different kinds of masks. And we're not happy to be home all the time, but we're doing it because we're both in this household are both in our 70s. And so I'm 75, my partner's 77. We don't think it's a good idea for us to be out too much right now.
The grab and go you were talking about, is that the food that is provided to the how many million students?
Well, we have about 500,000 students. We are feeding not just the students. We're feeding anybody who comes up. We made a decision relatively early on that we were not going to tell parents who lost their jobs in this pandemic that you don't get to eat, you just got to watch your kids eat. Or you have to lie and say that you have more kids than you have. Or you have to bring all your kids that you're getting food for in your cars so we can count them. We thought that was nuts. So we didn't do it. We just said, if you're hungry, there are 63 school locations spread out through the entire school district, from San Pedro down in the harbor area all the way up to Sylmar and Chatsworth in the north. So we cover a lot of territory, but between 8 and 11 a.m., Monday through Friday, anybody who drives up or walks up that has a mask on will get at least 2 meals for themselves and then any number of meals for any of the rest of their family, because we do not believe that it's okay to tell people good luck in finding food in a city that has so many low-income people as Los Angeles.
Is this a decision you made?
It's a decision that I made along with other board members and the superintendent of schools, but it was a decision that I pushed for very early on. I represent an awful lot of poor people.
I know. Was it hard to convince people that this was the right thing to do?
No. Everybody immediately agreed with everybody else.
Good for you. I mean, really, good for you. Good for all the families who thanks to you, don't feel ashamed that they can't afford a meal in these very, very, very troubling times. Now, you began your career working as a teacher in the Compton, in the Compton Unified School District.
That's after I came back to California. I first started out in Harvey, Illinois, which is a southern Cook County school district, because I was getting my master's degree and my teaching credential at the University of Chicago. But yes, when I came back to LA, I started teaching in Compton, and I spent the next 18 years there.
And what did that
teaching high school? I loved it.
What did that experience teach you? What did that love of teaching high school teach you? When you think about it, Jackie, now looking back, what are some of the moments which you might even call epiphanies from those moments that stay with you now?
Oh, there's so many. Give
me three. Give me three.
I'll give you three. I'll give you one young woman.
Even four.
Okay, one young woman who was my very first year in Compton, who was a senior in a class called Modern World and the Humanities, and she just felt like she could not learn how to do a social science research paper. She kept saying, I can't get it done, I can't get it done. And so we formed a little group of two of her friends and me, and she began to develop the confidence in herself that she was very bright. She just didn't think she was. And she didn't think she was because she was an African-American young woman who had inherited and had believed the trash that kids like her really couldn't do serious college prep work. And so she went on to go to UCLA, and I believe she went to a medical school after that somewhere in the East and is a doctor somewhere in the East Coast today. And then we started a school-wide reading program, so that's one case. Another case was I learned that you can learn to read at any age because we had, unfortunately, in my high school, ninth graders who missed enough words when they read something that it never made any sense. It was like a series of unrelated guess what the word is games as opposed to reading. And so we reorganized our school. We made two schools. We made a school for the kids who needed serious reading help and everybody else. And the serious reading help kids got teachers who worked on their reading 5 periods a day, regardless of what class it was: English, history, art, science, music. I even had to figure out how to write instructions in very simple English for the welding class so that everybody had to read every period of every day. And guess what? In less than a year, we had no non-readers left in the school. In less than 3 years, we had taken our school from the worst scoring reading school, high school in California, to the state average. So what I'm saying is I learned that you never give up on kids, that there's always a way to reach them if you keep trying, that you can't just say that somehow or another they can't learn. Of course they can learn. Of course they can learn. I've never met a child who can't learn and who didn't want to learn. But a lot of kids get very frustrated when their academic underlying basic skills are so low that they feel they're dumb and they give up on themselves. And so a lot of what I learned was to help kids find resilience and never give up. What
made you, Jackie, want to, from these 18 years of what, I mean, even hearing you talk about it is so inspiring and exhilarating when really feels you nearly in that classroom, changing the way,
yes.
I mean, I'm there with you, but what made you want to transition from teacher to member of the school board? And also, what did you hope to change? And perhaps even, what do you think you managed to change?
Well, this is my second time on the school
board. I know.
The first time I was on the school board was from 1983 to 1991, and I ran because it was a time in which people were trying to defeat the idea that desegregating the schools was a good idea. They were fighting and crazy fighting against it. And so I and a bunch of other people started a group that said, yeah, we're all for desegregating schools. And by the way, we're white parents and black parents and brown parents and Asian parents. And we want our kids all to go to school together. Well, oh my God, you should have heard that mess. Everybody said, you've got to be kidding me. We're trying to get rid of that. And so an organization began called Bus Stop, and it ran people for the school board, and it took over the school board. So that they, on the school board, were fighting the court case against themselves, saying, yeah, we agree. We don't want to be doing this. Let's not do this. Let's not do this. So I decided I didn't decide. I actually got talked into running because I was a part of a small organization called the Integration Project. And we were parents and community members who supported desegregating the school because we felt that all children learned better when they were learning that there are many different kinds of people in the world and you get to go to school with lots of them. So we were integrationists.
Creating, in a way, a sense of community rather than creating a club.
Yes, exactly. And so out of that group, we decided to run against one of the school board members because he had been appointed when one of the other ones resigned to move out of state. And I said, we can knock this guy off. And it happened to be where I lived because they were in districts, so you had to live in the district. And so, good, bad, or indifferent, I was one of the people in the Integration Project who lived in the district. And we fought over who had to do this, and I mean that seriously. Nobody wanted to. And I lost and won, if you know what I mean. I lost in that I didn't want to do it, but I did it. And at that time, the school board member was considered noblesse oblige. You didn't get paid. You got $1,000 honorarium each month. That's what you got. So I had managed to find the only job that paid less than teaching in Compton. That was in education. I don't know how I got so lucky. And also, you got no staff. You got one very, very skilled executive assistant that was a civil servant. You didn't get to pick them, and you got no staff. And you represented about 400,000 constituents.
Goodness.
With no staff. And no pay. But what did I go on to do? I went on to do several things. I went on to say that we should never give up on kids who can't read very well because of the experiences I had just finished. I ran to try to say that school desegregation is not something you should fight like it's death, but you should embrace it and understand that if we are all learning together, we are all going to make a much better, healthier society, because we're going to know if that African-American kid was a schmuck, it was just because he was a schmuck, not because he was black. Or if that white person was an idiot, it was because they were an idiot, but not because they were white. And that's the real value of school desegregation. It's not that kids of color learn better with white kids. That's crap. It's that we learn that there are lots of different kinds of people in the world, and the ones we like and the ones we don't like has nothing to do with their race or ethnicity, but how they behave.
Right.
And what their values are.
Which is tremendously important in the current atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
Tremendously important in the current atmosphere. But I also want to talk to you about funding for education in California, which reading up on it is shockingly low for reasons that are perhaps not unrelated to race. And you've said the fact is public school funding in California was the highest when the schools were the whitest.
Yes, absolutely true. I grew up in California. I'm 75 years old. We didn't want for anything at my high school. Classes were small. We had counselors. We had field trips. We had extracurricular activities. We had a band, an orchestra. We had drama. We had every type of athletic sport that you could imagine. The only thing I would say is that girls weren't treated so well back then, but our athletics were seen as stupid and dumb and not supported. But other than that, it was a great time to be in high school in California, man. They spent money on you. And, going to Berkeley was free. I went to UC Berkeley and paid no tuition.
I know. And
Zero, nada.
And what was so interesting about reading about your days at Berkeley, you were part of the free speech movement. What did the civil rights movement. Yeah, what did the free speech mean to you at the time? And what can schools do today to encourage free speech?
Well, the McCarthy era was still at its tail end. We had the big HUAC demonstrations in San Francisco against the Un-American Activities Committee. We had all this was just before I went to Cal. But civil rights was the issue in the 60s, not free speech. Free speech was necessary because they were trying to stop us from organizing civil rights demonstrations from campuses. So they were saying, you can't have that talk. You can't do that here. You got to go somewhere else to talk about the politics. This is a space that's politics free. It's independent of politics. Of course, it was political people who were pushing the regents to tell us that it was to be apolitical, right? That was all politics that made that decision, right? But they were claiming it was they wanted to keep the school an ivory tower, as I believe the expression was.
Yes.
Well, nothing could, of course, been further than the truth. So most of us, the year before the free speech movement, were involved in the civil rights movement with a extraordinary African-American young woman leading something called the Ad Hoc Committee to End Discrimination. And her name was Tracy Sims. And she began leading demonstrations in the Sheraton Palace Hotel in San Francisco, which was my first arrest. And we sat in because the hotel industry as a group, but the Sheraton was kind of a easy target because it was so visible. All the hotel industries did not hire any people of color in a city that was Chinese and African American in good numbers in any jobs that a public would ever see. So that meant you couldn't be a bellhop, which got tipped. You couldn't serve food, which got tipped. You couldn't do anything which got you tipped and which had a promotion or a career ladder. You were stuck cleaning rooms, and that was about it, and only if nobody saw you, right? So that was a huge problem, and we sat in, and we actually, after about 800 of us were arrested, although interestingly enough, to tell you the difference in the times, only 17, I think, or 19 of us were women out of the several hundred arrested. So what you have is a situation, even though the leader of this was a woman, a really dynamic and brilliant young strategist. But anyway, the point is that we were all involved in civil rights. We were involved in civil rights in Berkeley. We were involved. There was a store that was discriminating in hiring, grocery store, right, that catered to students, and we created a boycott and a teach-in and a shop-in to do that. There was a drive-in restaurant we were picketing. We were down in Jack London Square in Oakland. We were picketing. So, and all of that was being organized from the campus. And so the folks in Oakland included Bill Nolan, who was a former United States Senator from California, Republican. Today, he would be considered a radical Republican. He would be so far left, nobody could believe it. But he was far right in that, compared to us at that point.
Right.
So he called the regents and said, if you don't shut this stuff down where they can organize on the campus to come and wreck my, Jack London Square, and I'm going to just go after you forever. And so they banned the tables at Bancroft and Telegraph where we did all of our organizing. They said, you can't be there anymore. That's when the free speech idea had to be fought. Because if you want to do politics, you can't tell people who are students that they lose their citizenship when they step on campus. Your right to organize, your right to free speech, it shouldn't end when you step on campus. And so that was what it was about. It was about the right for students to organize, to have tables, to collect money, to urge people to go demonstrate, and that the only limitations were to be time, place, and manner. That is to say, you couldn't do it at a time with disruptive, or in a place that disrupted classes. You couldn't be disruptive. You had to do it at lunch, or you had to do it before or after school, after classes, or you had to organize.
And reading about you, I read also that you managed to be very strategic also in the way you presented yourself. You presented yourself as very proper.
Oh, yes, I always wore a dress. Killed me, but I did.
Tell me, how are you seeing the protests now in light of everything you've said?
Oh, I'm so excited by this protest. First of all, the tenacity of them. They come back every day. They keep coming back. They keep coming back. And they're not going to settle for the same crap that we have settled for in the past, which is, we'll revise our training of cops. We'll say they can't do chokeholds. They just can't. But see, if you don't change the outcome for a cop who then violates a policy like that, you made a policy, he violated it. If nothing happens, if there's no accountability, it doesn't matter that you changed the policy. It's irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant. Policies which are not enforced don't exist. That's all. They don't exist. And that's where we are right now. We've got lots of policies in California police forces. Lots of cities have said, don't do this and don't do that. But if you do it, everybody surrounds the cop and says, it must have been in policy because he was afraid for his life.
Do you feel
that justifies everything?
Do you feel that defund the police is a possibility?
I think it is possible to change police culture, but not without a tremendous continuation of outpouring of this. It can't stop, because as soon as it stops, everybody in city councils around the country are going to put their hand across their forehead and say, here, I thought I was going to have to take on the police union. That's the last thing I wanted to do. So people in cities are saying all kinds of words, but they're not going to do anything that's meaningful if they do not hold people accountable, and they won't hold people accountable unless the kinds of pressure that they're getting now is continued. And here's why this pressure is different than the past. I did all of these same demonstrations for these same reforms in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s. We never got the kind of level of participation we are getting now.
I think
that white people, I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful that we will take a leap. I'm not hopeful that we'll cure everything, because it ain't going to happen that way. But I'm hopeful we'll take a leap. And Karen Bass's 7 points in her legislation that she put into the House of Representatives is exactly what is required. You have to take out this limited immunity. You have to say that you can't hide your number of times there have been complaints against you with these so-called police officers' bills of rights. We can't let you have choke holds, neck holds. We don't want you to use tear gas, which, by the way, until World War II, about 10 years after World War II, what we now call it tear gassing. It's not tear gas. It is literally a banned poison gas from World War II, when we banned poison gases. And then the United States and other countries tried to rewrite the world by saying this isn't really a poison gas, it's a tear gas. It's not dangerous at all. Well, actually, it turns out you absorb too much of that, you'll die. It is a dangerous gas. So we want to get rid of that.
A young girl just died from it.
Yes, I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised. There are many more that nobody talks about. So what we have to do is we have to say, but the most important piece is accountability. Because I will tell you, I spent 8 years on the Los Angeles City Council, and I worked very hard to change the LAPD, and I made almost no progress. I have to say I made almost no progress. And why did I make no progress? Because the state laws protected their records from ever being seen by anybody. The city council, when we were being sued over the police behavior of a police officer, we didn't know until we were in court that officer had been cited 18 times for misconduct prior to this. We didn't know that. We might have settled that case without going to court and paying all that money if we had known we had no hope of winning against Scott. You know what I'm saying?
Jackie,
so we couldn't even get the information.
You were mentioning something in passing quickly, but it's tremendously important that when you went to Berkeley, it was free. Mm-hmm. At that point, yes. California was the 18th largest economy. Now it's the 8th largest economy. And I'm wondering, do you think there's a way back to free public college in California?
Yes. But it starts first with changing the Proposition 13, which is on the ballot in November. Schools and communities first. It will take commercial property that is not used for housing and say we're going to actually, oh my God, we're going to actually make you pay taxes on the value of the land. Not this phony 1% deal that was okay to save people who were losing their homes because they were retirees and fixed incomes. But the right wing said, oh, let's hide behind the seniors and let's make everybody get this tax break. So right now, Disneyland's paying the same property taxes in Anaheim that they did in 1978. But the tickets aren't the same prices in 1978. And the oil tank farms in Lomita, California are paying the same property tax on storing all that oil that they did in 1978, but gasoline prices aren't 1978. So they've been just ripping off this state forever, and it's time for it to stop. So that's step one. We've got to get to be like New York. New York's spending $30,000 a kid on their children.
I read those numbers. They're mind-boggling.
Yes, and we spend about 17, maybe.
Yeah, just half.
Maybe
really.
17. Yes.
Tell me...
and we're a lot richer state than they are.
How should high schools be preparing, do you think, students for college, given that the likelihood that college will entail so much student debt?
I think that we're going to make a move on student debt. I do think so. We in California, until the pandemic cut our income way down, I think, but we were providing free community college. That's the first 2 years of college. And our community colleges have been aligned with our state universities and University of California to have classes which are accepted as identical to the ones at UC and CSU. And so you've completed 2 full years and you can transfer directly to a CSU or a UC. So we've already taken some steps to reduce dramatically in-state college costs. What we really have to do is go back to taxing the wealth of this state in California. We have enough wealth in this state that we could tax it and we could go back to a free UC, CSU, and community colleges for all our kids. We could do that. We could definitely afford it.
I mean, it's so important. I mean, at UCLA, there's a group called the Debt Collective, and they
I know.
Yeah, we did something with them here at the Onassis Foundation before the pandemic. So important. Tell me. I mean, of course, you can't predict, but you know more than anybody else I've spoken to. What will school look like, do you think, this fall in Los Angeles?
I don't know. The problem is that we have no way to do testing and tracing and follow up if there's an outbreak, and you can't really open, hundreds of schools and put hundreds of employees and students in harm's way if you have no way to test and track and make sure that you know how to shut what down in time when there is an outbreak, and there will be outbreaks that we can be assured of. So. I don't know how we'll do it. What we've been looking at is a hybrid of part-time in school and part-time not in school. And I say not in school instead of home because we're looking at maybe we could put kids in recreation in parks or in community centers or in school community-based organizations that are nonprofits might have some space. We might be able to put kids a variety of places because there won't be enough room for them in their regular schools if you have to six feet apart, and you have to sit 6 feet apart.
I mean, it's worrisome, of course, on many counts.
It's very worrisome.
Not least of all because learning through Zoom and everything that entails
is not enough.
No, it's not enough.
It's not enough,
and it might even be detrimental in so many ways. So I'm curious.
I don't think so far that it's been detrimental, but and because the kids simply don't do it when they can't take it anymore. They just don't log on. So the real problem is that learning is social.
Right.
And it involves interactions.
We need to read faces.
And we learn from each other.
We need to read faces.
Right.
We need to read expressions. We need to see, how somebody reacts. We need to have conversations, not on a screen. And one of the worrisome things is we spend already so much time on screens. Do we need to spend more time? Which leads me to another question, which really happens in a community, which is really, as we end this conversation all too soon, I might say, what kind of civics should students be learning in public schools?
Well, the real future of public education and even private education is something that's called community schooling. And the community schooling says, let's stop looking at low-income communities as being a problem and instead see what the assets are in that community. And what assets are at schools, and what assets and what needs are there in the community, and what needs are there in the school. And let's have the school and the community get close together and work together so that perhaps we'll have school open 14 hours a day so that parents can come there if they don't have food. They can come and cook collectively together, or they can come and hold meetings about how to force real grocery markets to come into what we call food deserts. They don't bother opening up in low-income neighborhoods. Shame on them. So there are lots of problems in the community, and we think if the school and the community get close and tied up and closer together, and we've already started doing that with about 12 schools, and several others have done it just on their own. If we begin to look at that community schooling model, we might end up with something which civics is like literally built in.
Right.
Literally.
Well, Jackie, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed speaking to you. Both my boys in public school. One just graduated. Both of them are at Marshall.
Congratulations, Dad.
Both of them are at Marshall.
Good. So, my niece is graduating from Marshall tomorrow.
There you have it. And so very much ingrained in the east side of Los Angeles, in Silver Lake, Los Feliz, and that neighborhood. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed speaking to you, and the passion, the fervor that you were talking about, your tenacity. I applaud it. I often think of Emerson's great line that nothing ever great was achieved without enthusiasm. You don't lack it.
Yes, that's true. That's definitely true.
Thank you.
Paul, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and I enjoyed this very much.
And I look forward, I hope, to meet you in person soon.
Okay. Take care.
All the best. Bye-bye.
You greatly grateful.
To support this show and Dublab's progressive programming, go to dublab.com/support.